So myself, Abhishek Sivasubramanian. I'm software developer at Suyati Technologies, and I belong to the Evangelist group of Salesforce at Suyati Technologies. All right. So this is going to be the agenda for the session. Now, first of all, we'll familiarize with what Visualforce is, what are the situations when we should choose Visualforce, what are the benefits of using Visualforce. Then we'll just go and understand about some of the latest Apex version that comes out with the latest Winter 13 release. Then we'll familiarize with what is charting in general, what is the basic meaning of charting. Then we'll jump into Visualforce Charting, the features, limitations of Visualforce Charting. Finally, we'll do a hands-on coding, basically a simple example of Visualforce Charting and a bit more complex example on the Visualforce Charting. Right. Now, what is Visualforce? Visualforce is a framework that allows developers to build sophisticated custom user interfaces that can be hosted natively on the Force.com platform. So in Salesforce, the framework that allows you to create custom user interfaces is called as Visualforce. And as you know, Visualforce is a framework that is by default hosted on the Force.com platform. Now, just as we have been familiar with the HTML, Visualforce framework also has a tag-based markup. So in Visualforce pages also you would be able to see these Visualforce tags, right? Now, the ingredients that form a Visualforce are the Visualforce markup and the Visualforce controller. So just like if you imagine an ASP.NET page, uh, the web page that contains the source elements, that is the user interface elements, is going to be the .aspx page, right? And if your code behind the language that you're using for the code behind is either C#, if it is C#, the code behind file is going to be the aspx.cs. So just like that in Visualforce, the page that contains the markup elements, that is all the user interface elements, is called the Visualforce markup, and the code behind file that actually houses the business logic of this markup page is the Visualforce controller. So as you can see in this small figure which I have given here, the whole page as such is an Apex page element. So this is the tag that you use to denote a complete page in Visualforce. Now as you can see in this page, there are two sections, the topmost section and the bottom section. So those are actually called as page blocks. So the topmost part, this particular part, your account owners, that particular block is one page block in that Apex page, and the next one, which has a list kind of view, list view over here, that is also a page block. So as you can see, the first page block contains a data table, the account name and owner kind of data, that is a data table, and the second page block contains an enhanced list, okay, in which you can do all the searching, editing, deleting and all that kind of stuff. So it is a list that is more enhanced. Fine. So that is just a basic thing about Visualforce. Now, when to use Visualforce? What are the basic situations? What are some key situations where we would be choosing Visualforce as one of our solution? If your requirement is to build a wizard or a multi-step process, then you should go with the Visualforce, because the wizard and the multi-step process, it actually contains a completely customized user interface. You will need 2 or 3 pages linked together. If it is a wizard, you need to have 2 or 3 pages that has to be linked together, right? So it is completely a customized kind of user interface that can be only achieved using Visualforce. So the second point says that if you want to create your own custom flow, so if it is some kind of, if your business logic has some processes to do a lot of SOQL queries and so many things like that, and if you need to have all those data actually put in a different format as per your business requirements, that is the moment you need to decide to go with Visualforce. right? So if it is a different navigation pattern or a data specific rule, uh, you know, it basically creates an optimal and an efficient application interaction. So, if your business requirement comes up with a different navigation pattern and a different set of data, completely customized data set that has to be bound to these user interface elements, you know, those are some of the situations where you need to choose Visualforce. Now, this is just a few of the situations. All right. Now let us go into the benefits of Visualforce. Now, the first point is user-friendly development. Now, as I told you, Visualforce is a markup-based, right? So, when you actually develop a Visualforce page, you have a link called the custom component reference. Sorry, it is called the component reference. And if you click the component reference, you will have a list of all the markups, all the tags that can be used in Visualforce. What is the meaning of the tag? What are the attributes that are available on each of those tags? What is an example of usage of this particular tag? So all those kind of detailed explanation regarding each and every tag is available in the component reference. So it actually makes you easier to refer to that component reference and then do your development. So it is basically user friendly development. You have everything right in front of you to refer and to code. The second point is integration with other web services. Now, as you know that the code behind file for a Visualforce markup is your Visualforce controller. Now, Visualforce controller is nothing but an Apex class, right? So you could think of a scenario where you have a web service in your organization that is completely hosted on a public server, and you want to utilize the functionalities of that web service. What you could do is, take the WSDL of the web service, create an Apex class out of that WSDL file in the Salesforce. So it would be generating an Apex class for you, right? So all those things are actually automatically generated. So once that Apex version, the WSDL to Apex class is actually generated, you could actually bind the functionalities available. Now that the WSDL to Apex class is actually a skeleton of, or it is an actual representation of what your web service is, right? Now the controller could talk to the WSDL to Apex class, which is your representation of the web service, through a global class, which contains a lot of web service methods, right? So the integration is pretty much easier to do when it comes to the Apex side. Visualforce is a model view control style development. So a typical MVC style development where Visualforce markup is your view, which houses all the user interface tags. The controller is your Visualforce controller. And what is a Visualforce controller? It is an Apex class. The model is your standard objects and your custom objects and the data residing in those objects. Fine. So it is a typical MVC style development. The moment you start writing a Visualforce, it is MVC. Now, concise syntax. Now, what we could do with 2 or 3 tags in HTML, it could be just done using one particular tag in Visualforce. So even though the tags look very simple, it does a lot of things behind the scene. So it is a very concise syntax and it makes the life of a developer more easier because he has to just remember a few things in that. And more than that, you have a component reference to help you how to code and what are the attributes to put in onto those tags. Then data driven defaults. Now the interface elements that you have, that means the markups that you have in the Visualforce, it takes data out from the controller. So there is nothing like you can put a complete data set on your Visualforce markup. It has to be bound to a controller. The controller could be a standard controller with an extensions class, or completely a custom controller, right? Fine. So it takes all the data from the controller. So it is a kind of, MVC. So as you can visualize, the data always comes from the model. The data is actually fetched from the model using the controller, and the controller gives those data sets to the view. Now it is a hosted platform. The development of Visualforce, the moment you press Control S on your Visualforce page, if that saves successfully, at that time itself it is hosted. At that time itself, if you just type the URL on the browser, you would be able to access Visualforce. So it is a hosted platform, and by default Visualforce is automatically upgradable. That means when the releases of Salesforce come into picture, like Winter 13, if the next version is going to come, the next release is going to come, the Visualforce automatically gets upgraded. So none of your functionalities actually get affected. So if you have some kind of piece of controller that actually runs on a bit previous version of the Apex, you could change the version of the Apex. So it would be more easier. By default, on a new release, when you create Visualforce and controllers, it would be of the latest version. But if you want to use the old version, you could change the version of the Apex controllers. Fine. Now, regarding the latest Apex version that comes in Winter 13 release of Salesforce, the Apex version of the classes would be 26.0, and that is the latest Apex version in Winter 13 release. Now you could look into the additional features that have come along with Visualforce. What are the extra features that have come in Visualforce, or the modifications that have come in with the existing features. You could see that all those things in the release notes. Now this is a bit.ly link that actually is binded to the release notes, so you could have a look at it. Fine. Now, what is charting in general? Now, this is a very simple sentence, and it actually tells a lot about what charting is all about. Charting means a graphical representation based on a non-graphical data. So assume you have an Excel sheet which actually represents product sales in region-wise product sales. So if it is just put as two columns, the region and the sales percentage, the product sales percentage. So you could have three regions, if I'm putting it in simple terms: US, Europe, Middle East, Africa to be the second one, and Asia Pacific to be the third region. You could have X percentage, Y percentage, and Z percentage. Now assume that you have a big list of region and product sales percentage. It's going to be a nightmare for you to actually visualize the whole picture in your mind. So when you convert that non-graphical data to a graphical representation, that is the process. That process is actually called as charting. Fine. All right. Now let's come to Visualforce charting. Now, creating customized business charts based on data set you create directly from SOQL queries or by building the data set in your Apex code. So Visualforce charting actually creates a customized business chart based on your organization's requirements. You could actually come out with a completely customized chart that is completely or totally different from the traditional Salesforce charts, and which actually takes in data from a data set that is created using a SOQL query, or it could be a data set that is actually built in your Apex code itself. It could be a hard-coded data set. Now, for demo purposes, you could hard-code your data set inside the controller code itself. Now, when it comes to a real implementation scenario, you would be required to do a lot of SOQL queries and form your data set as per your organization's requirements, and then bind those data sets into the Visualforce UI elements. Alright. By combining and configuring individual data series, you can compose charts that display your data in ways meaningful to your organization. So just as I said before, you could actually make your organization's requirements in a very exciting manner with a lot of animations and a lot of interactivity into place. using Visualforce Charting. So it actually brings your customization to the maximum level with a lot of animation and interactivity. Now Visualforce charts are rendered client-side using JavaScript. Now Visualforce chart engine is completely JavaScript based, so it is completely Ajax. So when it is JavaScript, this allows charts to be animated, and it is visually exciting to look at a Visualforce chart. And the chart data would load and reload asynchronously, and that actually makes the users feel that the page is more responsive rather than the whole page rotating and you waiting for the whole page to load. The page would be loaded and the chart element would be loading. If it is a pie chart, you would see the slices loading one by one. So that actually gives you a fantastic feeling of how the chart actually responds, right? Okay. Now the same question, when to use Visualforce charting. So when the standard Visualforce charts and dashboards are insufficient in implementing your business requirements or your organization's requirements, that is a point you need to choose Visualforce charting. When creating custom pages which use charts and data tables tailored for your organization, that means just the same thing. If it is a custom user interface and you need a completely customized chart which takes in a completely customized data set as its data pool, that is a moment you need to choose Visualforce charting. Okay, so Visualforce charting features. Now, just as we know about charts, Visualforce charting also offers a lot of variations like bar charts, line charts, pie charts, gauge charts, radar and scatter charts. Now you could also introduce more page interactions with the JavaScript charting library. As I told you, the Visualforce charting itself is JavaScript based. So you could bring in a lot of JavaScript charting libraries like Google Charts into Visualforce, and maybe you could bring in more interactivity using JavaScript on your Visualforce pages. Visualforce charting limitations. Now there are also some limitations for Visualforce charting. The first limitation is Visualforce charts render on browsers which support scalable vector graphics. So almost all the modern browsers like Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, Safari, Opera, the browsers that actually support SVG graphics, scalable vector graphics actually can render Visualforce charts. So if you try to run Visualforce chart on a browser or a completely some kind of new browser that doesn't support SVG, you're not going to see Visualforce charts actually rendering. Now Visualforce charting uses JavaScript to draw charts, right? So it is very easy for it to throw errors, but you won't be able to see those errors coming out. Now you cannot use Visualforce charting in email messages yet. So till now you cannot actually embed a Visualforce chart in an email message and send it to your boss or to your co-worker. You cannot send that. You cannot do that actually. Maybe on the upcoming releases, Salesforce won't be considering the integration of this particular feature. So just as I told you, since Visualforce charting uses JavaScript, it throws errors behind the scene. You won't be able to see that because it's a client side, right? So when it throws those errors and messages, it is advised that we run a JavaScript debugging tool just like Firebug during the development, so that we can actually pick those errors and messages and correct it during the development itself. Fine. Alright. Alright, so let us now go into the hands-on coding on a Visualforce, a simple example of a Visualforce charting, right? Okay. So here I'm in my developer sandbox. And the first thing that you need to note when you start developing your Visualforce is to go inside your My Personal Information, choose the personal information, and you need to make sure that the development mode, this particular checkbox is ticked. So if it is not checked, you need to edit and tick it up and save it. Fine. So when you enable the development mode, you can use a lot of shortcuts, which I'm going to show you, to create Visualforce pages and to experiment out in a Visualforce page. Fine. So all right. So let us create a Visualforce page. So the way to create a Visualforce page is to type the after the https:// there is going to be an instance name. Here the instance name is ap1.salesforce.com. Just after that you need to type apex slash simple pie chart. Now simple pie chart, that particular thing is the name of the Visualforce page which you are going to create. Now just hit the enter button. Alright, so here we have a Visualforce error, and it says that a simple pie chart Visualforce page doesn't actually exist. Now you can use this particular link to create that page. So let us click that link. Alright. So congratulations, this is your new page, simple pie chart. Fine. So this is the Visualforce page. Now as you can see at the bottom that we have a particular development editor actually, in a minimized state. If I click this, the development editor actually pops up. So as I was telling you in the when I was going through the slides, that there is something called as component reference. I would just like to show you. Now this is a component reference page where if you click the, for example, okay, let me take a very simple one, input field. Okay, so what is an input field? An explanation about what an input field is. What are the attributes that you have? What are the attribute types? What is the data type of those attributes? The usage, which shows an example of how this particular tag can be used in a page, in a Visualforce page. So this actually is a very handy thing for a Visualforce developer to refer and code. Fine. All right. So fine. So let us actually delete this particular stuff. So we don't need that. Now actually here, now this is the Apex page, as you can see. Now here I need to say what my controller is going to be. So here I'm going to use a custom controller. So use controller here, and controller is going to be pie chart controller. So that is going to be the name of my Apex class that is going to act as my Visualforce controller. Fine. Now let me give a title for this page, and title is pie chart. If I press Ctrl S, let's see what happens. It says that you don't have this pie chart controller class actually created. So do you want to create that? So let me just click on that. It just creates it for me. So you can see another tab coming over here which actually has the controller code in it. So you can actually do the Visualforce markup as well as your controller coding just here itself. Okay. So let us actually write the pie chart controller. Alright. So in this pie chart controller, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually come up with a wrapper class, and going to call this class as public class pie wedge data. Alright. Then I'm going to have two properties in it. Now the aim of the simple example is to create a simple pie chart. Okay, so as you know, a pie chart has a lot of slices in it. So each slice should denote a particular name. For example, if we take a scenario like the region wise distribution, or a, for example, okay, let us take the example of a monthly sales. Okay, monthly sales of a product. So we need to actually denote each slice as different months, and the span, the width of that particular, or the size of the slice should be actually the data, right? So we actually need two properties in this pivot data, and one is public string name, and that is going to be a property for me, and the next property is going to be public integer data, which is going to be the size of the slice. Fine. Now let me create a constructor for this wrapper class, wedge data, the same name as the class name, and it's going to be a parameterized constructor, string name and integer data. I'm going to take two parameters over here, and what am I going to do inside the constructor? I'm just going to assign the current object's name property as the received name argument, and the data property of the current object with the data argument that I received. Fine. So this is our wrapper class, which is the pivot data. Alright, so now I'm going to write a method which returns a list of pivot data, and the name of the method is get pie data. Fine. Alright, now inside this particular method, I'm going to instantiate the list object pivot data, which is going to be the object name is going to be data, and new list pivot data. Alright, so here we have the list object. Now we need to actually fill the list actually, right? So what we are going to do here is, as I told you, we could actually, if we have a business scenario, we could actually be taking data from a SOQL query from a particular standard or a custom object. But if it is for a demo or an experimentation purpose, you could actually even develop a data set inside your controller class itself. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to hard code things here. So list object dot add new pivot data of Jan, 30. Alright, so let me just copy this. Feb, March, April, May, June, July. Okay, now let us return the data. Okay, and let me change these values to Feb, March, April, May, June and July. And let us put it as 15, March to be 10, April, okay, 20, May, okay, 20, and let this be 2, let this be 3. Fine. Alright, so our controller is actually done. Let me press Ctrl S to save this. Okay, so controller is saved there. Now let us come back to the Visualforce code and try to bind that, try to take the data using that particular method, get pie data, and then build a pie chart over here. Alright. So the way to start off is using Apex chart. Apex chart height, let me put it as 400 and width as 450, and the data that is going to come to this particular chart is nothing but the method, the get pie data. Okay, alright, so here we have actually bound the data set to that chart element. Now let us tell the Visualforce that I want a pie series out of this. Okay, so don't need this thing, and in the pie series you need to tell what is your data field and what is your label field. Okay. And your data field is going to be data, which is the data property in the wrapper class. Okay, so this is going to be your data field value, and this is going to be the label. Okay, now label field is going to be name. Now we need actually a legend to say, what each colors in the Visualforce pie chart actually represents to. So we need to tell where this particular legend has to appear. Okay, so legend and position should be, okay, let us put it as right. Okay, so this actually completes the Visualforce code for a pie chart. Okay, now we can do some more changes on this particular Visualforce so that we actually take off this Salesforce header and the sidebar and everything. Okay, so show header equal to false and sidebar equal to false. Okay, now just see the magic when I am going to press Ctrl S. Okay, Ctrl S. Okay, so here is our simple pie chart, and if I hover my mouse over the slices, you can see some animations coming out here. Actually, we didn't say any animations in the code, right? And that is what Visualforce chart comes out with. It has some default set of animations and interactivity. The moment I hover over that particular slice, it shows Jan 30, Feb 15, March 10. All those things are actually coming by itself. So this is the power of Visualforce charting. The most interesting part is this thing sliding off. That's great. Okay, so let us just take off this section, press Ctrl S again. Okay, fine. Now let us go into a bit more complex charts. So we'll just try to draw a line chart basically. So let me say apex slash line chart, and it says the Visualforce page doesn't exist, so just click the link. It creates a Visualforce page for you. Okay, Let us remove this default code and let us say what is the controller for this. Controller is going to be chat controller. Okay, let me name it like this. When I press Ctrl S, it's going to say the controller doesn't exist. Yes. So let us click this link. It is going to create the controller for us. Okay. So let us first of all complete the controller code. Alright. Okay, so I have a set of code actually with me. So I'm just going to paste this thing. Press Ctrl S. My chart controller is just ready. Now let us just concentrate on how we do the line chart Visualforce. Fine. Alright. So as you know, the chart area actually starts with the apex chart tag, right? Apex okay, apex chart. All right. So if you look at the controller, we have the wrapper class over here, right? So it is actually the wrapper class is called as data. The data has four properties basically: name, data 1, data 2, and data 3. Fine. All right. Okay. So here we are going to say, all right. So here we are going to say the height. Let us fix it as 400, and the width as 700, and let us say that the data, that means the data set, okay, the data set is actually coming from which method? Now if you look at the method is named get data, right? Fine. So here we need to give data. The get and set, you know, the get and set in that method name, if you see, it is get data, right? So you actually need to specify the data there. You know, the get and set, it automatically recognizes it. All right. So that is our chart, and we have specified the data set that is going to bind into this chart. Now we need to say an axis, right? Because it's a line chart, it has an axis. Okay. And the type is numeric axis, and the position is going to be on the left, and the field which I'm going to bind here on this left axis, okay, that is going to be data 1 property. And title, let us say it is opportunities closed, and grid property to be true, so it actually shows the grid lines in that axis. Fine. Right. Now the next axis, apex axis, type is category. As you can see, the values actually come up in the IntelliSense, so it's more easier. And the position is going to be, category position is going to be on the bottom, so that is the horizontal axis. And the field which I'm going to bind on that horizontal axis is the name, name, and the title of that horizontal bar is month of the year. Okay. Okay, let's close that. Then we are going to say I want a line series. Fine. All right. And line series, we're going to say axis to be the left axis based, and fill equal to true, fill property equal to true. I'm just going to show you how that all these fields actually act into. The X field, as you know, we have to say which axis is actually it is binding to. So X field is going to be name, and the Y field is going to be the data 1, because that is going to be the vertical axis, right? Fine. Now let us say, let us use this property marker type is equal to cross. That means the points, each and every turning points or a sharp turning points in the line chart is going to be marked with the cross. That is what we mean by the marker type equal to cross. And we need to say what is the size of the marker. So what is the size of that cross marker, and let me just say it as 4. And then we can say what is the color of the marker. Okay, now let me use this color hash FF0000. So this is going to be the red color basically. Fine. Okay, so here we complete the line series for line series chart. So when I'm just going to press the Ctrl S. Wow. So just look at the interactivity of these this particular line series. Now I hope you remember that we use the fill property, right? Now if I say fill equal to false, just see what is going to happen. That blue color filling is going to go, right? Okay. If I say it is true, the region below that particular line series is going to be filled. Now you can see some basic animations and interactivity that comes into place. You know, when I hover over that particular cross, the cross becomes blue and it shows me it is November 80, and that line series, that line also highlights a bit. If I move my cursor out of it, you know, that highlighting effect actually goes off, and you can see our vertical axis and the horizontal axis. The vertical axis was numeric type, where we had numbers binding into, and that was the opportunities closed. And we had grid equal to true. Grid equal to true means the lines actually, the grid lines start from that particular axis. So as you can see, we gave grid equal to true for the numeric axis. So the lines start from the numeric axis. Okay, and the category axis, that is actually showing the name: January, February, March, April, May, June, all those things. And the line series, as you can see, it is based on, the line series is plotted based on which axis? That is mentioned by the left. So when we say axis equal to left, it means the line series is plotted with left axis values as the reference. Okay, and what is the X field, the Y field value, the marker type, as you know, the crosses, the marker size, and the marker fill also, right? So I hope this is much more clear for you when we look at a bit more difficult, you know, this is a bit difficult thing to code. Now we could have much more complex charts also coming into picture. Okay, so I would just like to show you that complex chart. So let me type a complex chart, create a new Visualforce page. Okay, so let me actually use a code which I have along with me, and I'm just going to show how things actually become a bit more complex. As you can see, the color, you know, the Visualforce code that I have actually typed, it is a bit more complex actually to what we had actually coded till now. And if I just press Ctrl S, you're just going to see how the charts are going to get a bit more complex. Can you see this? It's actually a combination of line series and bar charts. Okay, fine. So that's great. And if I can show you a bit more complex one, and I'm just going to paste that code. So you can see that it's just again a combination of line series, two line series and one bar chart, and we have this legend over here, right? So you can see all these interactivity, the bar charts getting the bar elements getting highlighted when I move my cursor over it, and also the line series also highlighting when I move my cursor over it. Can you see this? Yes. So this is just a preview of how you can take your Visualforce chart coding to an extreme level, and it is completely based on your again your way of thinking and how you bring all these elements together and how you think you can put all these things. And I think this session would be a bit useful for you to understand how Visualforce charting can be customized into a completely, starting from a very simple level to a completely complex level, how you can take Visualforce charting into. So fine, so that is on the, so we completed the simple example and we also completed the complex example. So thank you for watching this screencast. So myself Abhishek Sivasubramanian. We'll have more and more screencasts coming into. Thank you for watching. Have a good time. Bye.